You're listening to the Quint's podcast.
Day 2 of the third test between India and Australia ended with India at 96 for 2, trailing Australia by 242 runs after they were bowled out on 338. Lots of great contributions from players today. My guest Ayaz Memon is with us. Ayaz, you're one big performer of the day?
It has to be Ravindra Jadeja. He picked up 4 wickets. He effected the run out of Steve Smith just when Steve Smith looked like he might cut loose and add maybe 25-30 runs more, which would have been very vital at that point in time. So Ravindra Jadeja as a bowler and as a fielder, certainly the hero of this day's play. From the Indian side, from Australia, one has to say that Steve Smith's return to form has been the best news that they've got so far in this series, because he had been struggling in 2 test matches. He's come back and made his 27th test century, which is quite remarkable for a still a young man. He's got maybe 6-7 years more of his cricketing career remaining. So, the sky's the limit.
I'm Menra Dorji.
And I'm Ayaz Memon.
And you're listening to the Aussie Challenge podcast on the Quint, powered by Farm Easy and MediBuddy.
Okay, I'll quickly take you through the scores. Australia started the day at 166 for 2 and ended up making 338. Marnus, Labuschange and Steve Smith were the overnight batsmen. Labuschange got out on 91, but Smith went on to smash a century. In fact, he made 131 and was the last of the Aussie wickets to fall, a brilliant run out by Ravindra Jadeja. The third high scorer on the day was Mitch Starc, who made 24. Tim Paine was out on 1 to Bumrah. Jadeja picked 4 wickets, Bumrah and Saini 2 each, and Siraj 1 by stumps. India had lost 2 wickets of their openers, Shubman Gill and Rohit Sharma. Shubman, though, had made his half century, and Rohit got out on 26. Pujara and Rahane at the crease. Now, Ayaz, after the day Australia had yesterday, if you were told India would be trailing by 242 at stumps on day 2 with 8 wickets in hand, you'd take that, right?
I think, yes, India should take that. Though I think in the last session, maybe in the last hour, they got a little too dour in their, run making, and they were more intent on defense, which is fine because you want to take a first innings lead here, and therefore you have to bat very cautiously. But at some stage, you start wondering whether just being runless for such long spells is not going to be counterproductive. Because look what happened with Australia. Between Cameron Green, Tim Paine and Pat Cummins, they batted 44 runs to score 1 run, 44 balls to score 1 run. And that ultimately told, the score could have been 20-30 runs more. So some enterprise needs to be shown, I think, by the batsmen, especially the top order, because while this, it's a battle of attrition, there's no doubt about it, but this pitch is quite flat. There's not such a threat from either pace or spin in this pitch so far. It could deteriorate very fast, but that's why it's important that the Indian batsmen also keep chugging along, getting the runs without taking undue risk.
Shubman Gill, you just need to listen to the commentary to know how impressed not just the Indian cricketers but the Aussies are as well with him. I remember before the series, Sunil Gavaskar had talked about how impressed he was and how impressed Alan Border was. So, he just looks so calm and collected out there, even, as young as he is.
Oh, absolutely. I think he's been in many ways the find of this tour. A debutant playing against Australia in Australia, these are very daunting, tough conditions. The opponents are, test you severely. And I think what's coming through is that there's a certain method and a mindset with which he approaches his game, in his batting. No loose ball goes unpunished. He's also tightening up very swiftly on his technique. So this was his maiden half century, but it looked like he had probably batted in more matches than just his second test match, because there was a composure and a calmness about him which was quite refreshing.
Okay, in the last game we had Ashwin weave his magic, and now there's Jadeja 4 for 62, and big wickets he took. Labuschange, Matthew Wade, even Steve Smith's run out was brilliant. Do you at times feel maybe Jadeja is not given enough credit for all that he does bring to the table?
No, I think he does get his credit. He might not be your biggest star. He might not be a Rohit Sharma or a Virat Kohli or, in the recent past, MS Dhoni. But, in many ways, he's emerging as the MVP, the most valuable player for India. And remember, he plays across formats. His fielding is absolutely brilliant. I think he's probably the best in the world today. And, his batting has come along extremely well in the last couple of years. His bowling like Ashwin has done in the first 2 tests, in this match, he's picked up 4 wickets. So he's showing the ability to pick up wickets overseas also. Remember, he's got more than 200 test wickets, So I think, yes, he's a little underrated as a test cricketer, but I think he's making enough, giving enough signals to everybody, including his critics, to say, hey, look at me, I am also a terrific player.
And then Ashwin, we've of course talked a lot about how he's been brilliant in the first 2 matches. He went wicketless in this innings. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it can happen. You've had a couple of very good test matches. The opposition is also studying you very hard. I think what happened in this match, and that's not to it's not to India's advantages, that the contest between him and Steve Smith won. He had got a vice-like grip on Steve Smith in the earlier 2 matches. Smith broke free, played him quite superbly, and losing that battle seemed to affect even Ashwin, because Ashwin was just looking forward to getting his scapegoat, so to speak. And between him and Labuschange, they actually pulled Australia out of the web that Ashwin had spun around them. And I think the credit must go to Smith and Labuschange for that.
Do you think there'll be some amount of pressure on Cheteshwar Pujara, considering, we haven't really seen some big scores from him, and this does, the match is sort of poised for him, to give us a big innings. So you think that'll be on his mind?
Well, it should be, or it would be on his mind, because, he's such a big player for India, and he's had such a terrific tour the last time the Indian team was there. So expectations from him will be obviously very high. And the opposition also knows that he's such a, if he settles in, then he can play a really long innings. So they are also very eager to get him out early. They try and hustle him using pace, spin, short pitch bowling, etc., whatever else they can throw at him. I think somewhere that Pujara, the defensive posture needs to be adjusted a bit to also keep the runs going, because you need to keep the singles, keep the strike, rotating the strike, so that the pressure doesn't build up on both sides, at both ends, which is what was happening in the last hour when we saw both Rahane and Pujara going into their shell. So I think tomorrow's first session, that is one area in which these 2 stalwarts have to correct the situation.
Okay, and there's another little sort of controversy brewing. That's, apparently the BCCI have written to Cricket Australia about not wanting to go into another hard quarantine before the next match. And it's sort of, you understand both sides of the story as well, right? You want to be safe, but then again, players have started talking about mental fatigue and being in a room for such a long time. So you understand both sides of the struggle here? Yes,
look, these are very trying, very difficult times for players across the country and across the universe, So I think a very hard lockdown is something that no player appreciates. People like Steve Smith and David Warner spoke about that when they were playing in the IPL. I'm sure that, even for them, in the BBL, we've had, Big Bash League, we've had some cases of protocol being breached by, say, Chris Lynn and a couple of other players. So it's not easy on any of the players. I think India's concern is more to do with the fact that they've been continuously in a biosecure bubble for maybe the last 5-6 months, starting with the IPL. Of at least 5 months. So that's beginning to tell. I think it's fraying the nerves. Now, whether it's going to be entertained or not remains to be seen, because a lot of it is linked to the COVID protocol in the country. And Australia, as we know, is a federally governed country, in the sense that the rules for New South Wales, where Sydney is based, Sydney Cricket Ground is based, may be very different from Queensland, where Brisbane, the Brisbane Cricket Ground is based. So all that is playing on the minds of the team. I think somewhere a solution needs to be found out quickly to each one's or everyone's satisfaction, because otherwise you go into the next match carrying a lot of baggage on your head.
Okay, that was the last of my questions. Thank you so much, Ayaz, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mandra.
And thank you all for listening to the Aussie Challenge podcast with Ayaz Memon on the Quint, powered by Farm Easy, India's largest online pharmacy, and MediBuddy.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts.